Well, hi everybody. You're extremely welcome to tonight's launch. It's wonderful to have so many people here supporting these wonderful three poets. We're going to be very soon hearing from Eve, Ian, and Patrick launching these exciting new pamphlets. My name is Neil Munro. I'm the director of the Oxford Brookes Poetry Centre, where Ignition Press is based. I'm just going to say a few words by way of introduction about the press, and then our usual process. If you've been to one of our launches before, thank you for coming back. Our usual process is for each editor who's been working with each of the poets to give them a short introduction. Unfortunately, one of our editors, our managing editor of the press, actually, Les Robinson, couldn't be with us. So my colleague Claire Cox, who also edited Eve's pamphlet, has very kindly said she'd step in and introduce Patrick in on behalf of Les. So each poet is going to read for about 15 minutes each. And then it will be Patrick, followed by Ian, and then Eve. And then I'll invite them all to read one more poem at the very end before we wrap up around 8. I should also say that the event is being recorded. If you know anybody who couldn't make it but would like to watch it later on, they'd be very welcome. It will pop up on our YouTube channel and also on our website in due course. If anybody's got any questions about any of that, please feel free to email us ignitionpress@brookes.ac.uk. There are also closed captions available if you'd like to make use of those. So as we'll go along, I will be sharing a few links in the chat to pages on our website where you can track down information about all the poets and also get hold of copies of their pamphlets. I should also draw attention to the fact that we're currently got a sale on of pamphlets of the past pamphlets that we've published. So you can buy pamphlets in the back catalogue for a much reduced price. So please check that out as well. If there's any gaps in your Ignition Press sort of archive, feel free to take advantage of the offer. So the press itself was established by Oxford Brookes Poetry Centre, based at Oxford Brookes University, with the aim of being a press with an international outlook, which publishes original, arresting poetry from emerging poets. And it's really fantastic, actually, to see that some of our poets we've previously published are in the audience this evening. So thanks so much to you for coming along and continuing to support the press. We've now published 28 pamphlets, 6 of which have been selected as Poetry Book Society pamphlet choices. 3 were shortlisted for the Michael Marks Award for Poetry, which is an award for pamphlet poetry. In 2021, the press won the Michael Marks Publishers Award. If you're interested in hearing more about Eve, Ian, and Patrick, they're also on the website. You'll be able to find some interviews with each of them that I conducted. So you can listen in and find out some really fascinating things, insights into how the poets put the collections together, and a little bit about the poems. And they read a poem in each of those interviews as well, so you get a bit more of a taste of the whole pamphlet. If you're not already following us on social media, please do. We are at Brookes Poetry. That's BROOKES Poetry on various platforms. This is also the final time I'm going to have the chance to say thank you to my fellow editors for their work on a set of pamphlets. So both Claire Cox, who you're going to hear from in a minute, and Les Robinson are retiring. In Claire's case, she's also retiring from her role at Oxford Brookes University, where she's been an amazing, really fantastic advocate for the value of the creative arts and for how an academic institution can and very much should champion them. She's going to be very much missed. Although he's not present this evening, I also wanted to acknowledge Les's contribution, not just to Ignition Press, actually, but to kind of poetry in the UK in general. Les's work in poetry began with his own press, which he's about to sort of stop working on, Tall Lighthouse, more than a quarter of a century ago. It's quite good he's not here to hear me say that again. Tall Lighthouse actually published more than 100 collections by more than 70 poets. So I want to say, take this opportunity to say huge thanks to both Claire and Les for all of their fantastic work on Ignition Press. They co-founded the press with me and Alan Buckley in 2017, and they've made the press what it is, editing many of the pamphlets, helping to ignite poets' careers, and addressing all those successes we've had, but also the many challenges that small presses encounter with grace, good humour, and wisdom. So if there were a way of virtually clapping, this would be the time to do the virtual applause. So thank you so much, Claire and Les. So now on to the launch. Many congratulations to Ian, Eve, and Patrick. It's been a real joy and a great privilege to work with you and to publish your poetry. So thank you so much for entrusting your work with us or to us. I'm going to hand over now to Claire to introduce Patrick on behalf of Les. Claire.
Hi everybody, thanks ever so much, Neil. Yes, it's the last one, but I'm in disguise, whoopsie, as Les. So imagine me a lot taller and with a slight South London accent. But I am delighted and absolutely privileged to introduce Patrick and his book Glass Knocked Sun, a little poetry pamphlet filled with amazing things. One thing that we missed out on in the live launch is that it has got concrete poetry in it. So that's what you see. So the amazing use of greater than equals naught greater than and going the other way, less than less than 0 equals less than, and they produce a whole bunch of little fishes. So that is a delight in store in terms of the concreteness and the beauty of this particular pamphlet. So that's my little pitch because I love it so much. If you can imagine now that I'm transforming into Les, here I am. And this is Les's intro, very thoughtfully done in huge, great font print, so I can read it very, very clearly. So of Patrick, Les has said, after reading Patrick's initial submission, it's fair to say that Les championed Patrick's poetry, believing it carried a sometime unique voice. And indeed, that's true. Over the years, becoming pretty jaundiced with poetry in its rare for him to be inspired by a poetry that carries a certain edge that sets them apart from the rest. This is Les's feeling refreshed on seeing Patrick's amazing work. And then getting to meet them, Les soon realised he held a determined passion for his work as well as being a pretty cool dude. Check out his brand anoraq. Don't know if we can do that online, but there it is. Les says it was brilliant working with Patrick as he was always knew what he wanted to achieve and was mostly open to input, suggestions, and even criticism. Back in 2018, Les worked with Patrick James Errington, who's gone on to achieve great things, and he is proud to bookend his work with Ignition Press with another Patrick, who will also make an impact on both the poetry and the music world, echoed in these words that Les has provided from the poet Neil Campbell, and here they are. Patrick has that sensitivity that marks out the best writers. This is the first pamphlet of a writer who is going places. So, Patrick, it'd be lovely to hear from you now. Thank you.
Oh, Claire, thanks so much for that generous introduction, and thanks for acknowledging the fishes in the concrete poetry. It's a pleasure to be reading again with Ian and Eve. We had such a nice time on Thursday, and it's nice to be back and to hear their wonderful. I'm looking forward to hearing their wonderful work in a second. This poem is called Documentary. If there's a record somewhere of the storm that drowned my bluest corn and set me fielding out on the breakwater's rough sand, if one exists whose bright flags could recalibrate the vanishing point I watched from as the flood became a galloping wave, and show me the pollen thickening our hair while in some interior place a bedmaker down tools, having carried the world off on a battered door with no beading. If one was kept, not bothered where, I'm after it, so as to watch through its safe keyhole for the moment when I found that stroke, the one that shook the lightning down for change, as I reported back to a contact list, the cousins, cradle Catholics and lost boys, and blow a little on the hurricane season that flattened the crop I'd spent my summer guarding with Auntie's birthday gun. So one of the things I've been thinking about recently that informs some of these poems is the idea Gaston Bachelard puts forward in the Poetics of Space, which is that one of the things that makes us feel fond of a place is a kind of latent poetry. The vocabularies that exist with reference to a kitchen, for example, or an attic or a basement, in circulating in discourse, and that these are kind of um, uh, these exist in the subconscious, and we project onto our domestic spaces. So this next poem considers what it might feel like to be in a space whose meanings have fled it, ones which we can't make sense of. If I couldn't sleep in the granary, it was because the walls were ghosting me when I'd come all that way to hear them speak. No, here once lived and died. No vision of a father hiding from his daughter's love. No ribald song or scream upon the draught. The uneventful night, not just unjust, but amping up my bargaining and threats. Spider, show me. Mother, give me thistle. Army, give you God my thin-webbed tongue. Moondrunk. Everywhere at war, but there. I beg the settled dust for honest words. A sign of each mistake made in that hollow where they'd once kept grain for times of need, of which there must have once been tons and tons. Losing an allergy. We gathered the almonds of that winter, but believing myself intolerant, come February I'd tasted none. Every adobe ruin but the church, where a mandarin lay at the root of the tree, pipped and dry inside its baggy peel, had fig leaves spread across its walls, a threshold but no door, was bound to the groves by the mustard road on whose damp beds of litter and spent cartridges their shells lay clean as bone. All damn winter. I split them lengthwise with our oldest tool, then into good and bad. Fed you their hard milk. Before the night you put one on my tongue, and briefly unafraid, I held for the reaction I'm still due. That poem was inspired by my first taste of almond. Up until surprisingly recently, I was under the idea that I was allergic to almonds. Taste testing was how I discovered I wasn't, and I remember being very struck that they tasted a bit like the smell of sheep's wool, like lanolin or something like that. Improvements. To convince himself some things could stay as they're left, he'd stick a coin under a stone in the wall, swapping it out for a new one whenever he returned, which would be later that morning or months down the line. He didn't know our names, those of us who lived here before he had the walls torn down and the furniture burned. But he noted how the stones had been laid, blank faces outmost, with uneven spaces between them. By coin, I just mean whatever he happened to have in his pocket. A Rolly filter, the copper wire from inside an internet cable that he twisted into a daisy at peacetime. Some things settled his doubts better than others. The girl who was a foal who left the paddock without leave. Mine is the shut-eye of freight, jackfruit and tires, containers and the blast of the boxcar horn sounding another stage, 4 monthly trains. So goodbye to charity and steam as the line in red dust runs north toward the glass-knot sun, throwing shadows on the beaten sleepers, sand and tracks, where beaten is to dream of falling and to wait because you're falling towards rails, or falling off the jeep for the third time and down a mine shaft. You can be sure you've almost arrived when you get to the roadkill bucket, the borehole road end. Broken tiles, girders, promises you're not competent to keep, no work. But when you hear the strangled crow of cocks over the concrete top with broken bottles, in them you'll surely hear the voice that sang us all the way down the mountain. That time we freewheeled into the desert, expecting to find it aflame with butterflies, but instead found our saddlebags open, trailing what few things we had left in common. This next poem is called Gloop, Gloop Winwick. For those of you who don't know, a gloop is it's a coastal sinkhole. Many fjords begin their lives as gloops. They're created by the hydraulic pressure of waves on soft rock at the bottom of a cliff, and they are these extraordinary habitats for seabirds, and they have a kind of an incredible kind of primordial energy. They feel like places from the distant past. Running in my dream, you celebrate the honey of a summer thought. To move up here and run, I dream you yell. To give my notice and run, you laugh and look in vain for causeways through our double pair of legs, knee-deep in myrtle, young nettles, barreling past that chimney ruin at the head, all the heat of boiling water, boiling rope and heather gone, to the lip of this teen fjord, this gull church, whose floor of air, mid-stride, will no doubt wake me. So, this next poem is called A Doorway Between Explosions. After the San Juanico disaster, Mexico City, 1984. The first, having shaken home the city's roots, we went to get you from your house under the hill. You stood waiting beneath the cracked lintel, the fallout dawn bracing for a second, a shawl across your shoulders, and in the hand you held at your apron an avocado, as if the deaths we did not yet know had taken place, stopped there, at that emboldening armored fruit, the stone at the center of all the pain still unaccounted for. The maker Steve Thompson and I spent a year of weekends and evenings building a Greenland kayak a year or two ago. Steve is an incredible carpenter, and one of the kayaks that he then went on to make after this one that we built is on display as part of a moving exhibition called Ash Rising, which is raising awareness about ash dieback, which is a disease affecting species ash across the UK. And one of the incredible things about building the kayak was its absence for so much of the making process, because compared to, for example, a dugout canoe, which you bore out of a single piece and you gradually see take shape, building a kayak is to assemble components. So for so much of the construction, we were kind of working around an empty workshop floor, which was kind of mad, and it existed in our imagination. As it continues to do, since I haven't seen it in a long time. And it has the epigraph "Anchor by the Water Lily," which is from Ian Hamilton Finlay. Kayak. Although it grew stringers, lashings, a combing, Weeks into its making, it still seemed less solid than the song in my head as we bent oak slats on a jig, vague as that old hurt we were displacing, rib by jammed rib, stitch by hooked stitch. And maybe that's just how it's going to feel, no matter how we weatherproof the skin before that first pea soup weekend, when we'll be said to have left our own on shore, having paddled out on a prowse bearing past rum in a buck hide and minky bone currach after sharks. Stories, as in floors of a house. Sometimes when my body comes in from scaffolding gravity, you twist the rig of an embrace across its folded hands, and with the slightest tension, leaning back, lift it off the ground. The sound of spring-loosed pool balls in their chute is my spine, releasing the tension it's been loaded with, having shrunk the longer I've stood. What's left in the air against you could be my lasting structures, returning to familiar forms, yours, their own. You who do the lifting, rigged like this, our stories strained against each other in their fixings, how much there briefly is to stop their collapse. And I'll read one more. Hand luggage. If it's to be a fall from grace, I'll follow single file through security's freestanding doorway, having left every sin I ever committed behind and handed over the whole doll I keep ready. There will be no grounds for a pat down. Crossing, I'll recall the scene in Amores Perros, where the fighting dog is shot for the stray's crimes. Of absolute sea I will dream as I cross. I kept impeccable records. They're all burned. Who, hearing of my departure, seeing me in the line, would stop me, with nothing more required of them than the choice to look away, let me walk through, without setting off the alarm. Thank you all very much for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Patrick. That was wonderful reading. I'm sure a lot of those images are going to stay with people for a long time. It's really, really precise. And one of the great things about Patrick's pamphlet, I think, is just the sort of integrity of it. There's a lot, you know, where you can trace themes, you can trace ongoing references to buildings or to the outdoors or to making things. And it's really beautifully constructed in itself. So check it out, please, if you haven't done so already. Next, we're going to hear from Ian. And I'm going to introduce him. I've been working with Ian on his pamphlet. It's been a great pleasure doing so. And it's perhaps not surprising that for a pamphlet that's so very grounded in a particular place, as you're going to hear, a small town in Scotland. I'm sure Ian will say something about that. He's just been there, actually. So he's got sort of these images in his head right now. One of the most compelling features about Ian's work is its powerful evocation of the environment and the atmosphere of Burntisland, this place. And yet what you're going to get is not the touristic version of the place that we see maybe on websites. And that's not what you're going to see in these poems, but you're going to get a version of the town that often pays attention to empty, uninhabited spaces, the pallet yard, the railway line, the bridge, and as Ian puts it at one point, the mud-crowned underworld. But despite this feeling of absence and loss, this is not a somber pamphlet by any means, and we quickly become aware that there are people haunting the margins, whether they're figures from Ian's personal history, his family, or from the history of the town. One of the things I think the pamphlet does so beautifully is to urge us to pay attention to these people who were once full of hope and potential, just like us, and can be again, living through the pages of the collection and through readings as Ian is about to give us. So Ian, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Neil. It's been a fantastic process working with Neil on this, and I'd like to thank the Ignition team and Neil for all their help on this. This is now my 4th time reading my poetry at any length, so they've really given me a beginning in this, and I'm really, really grateful for that. I'd like to start actually with the inscription and talk a little bit about that. I chose as the inscription something from Sven Lindqvist's book, Dig Where You Stand. Apologies to any Swedish people who might not like my accent there. But it says, it was all coming back to him as if the factory was his again. He went up to the hole in the kiln where he used to stand, staring into the glowing mass. All he could see now was cold darkness. And the idea of the book came up, had a lot to do with the idea of dig where you stand, of digging into a place, the place you feel like you're most from, to see if you can find any connections with that place, and how real those connections feel. And sometimes there's a great sense of unease there, and sometimes there's a great sense of connection there. And one way to do that is to go to the local museum when you visit a small town, or anywhere really, go to their museum. So this first poem is called Key, and it opens the book, but it also references music, and I'll read it now. I'm part of an exhibit in the local museum, a cardboard cutout boy version of me, with hands on hips in a plyboard Edwardian fair. The path winds anti-clockwise around a taxidermy lion, a unicorn from a carousel, a map with streets I don't recognize, plans for an abandoned village, photographs of ships, Ormazd waiting in the docks, Leviathan at the ferry slip. If you want to see me, talk to the librarian. She'll show you where the switch is and how to start the music. Thank you. And in the local museum in Burntisland, if you want to see it, you do indeed have to talk to the person and ask about it before they'll let you in. And for the moment, there is actually a life-size cardboard cutout of me as a 15-year-old boy in that museum, which is very, very strange, going back there with your family and showing them it. This next poem is called After the Shift. And of course, shifts can relate to shift work and can relate to the shift between the industrial and the post-industrial. Burntisland as a town had shipbuilding, it had shale mines, it had aluminium processing plants, and it was a hub for coal coming from Fife and from West Fife and Central Fife and going through to Edinburgh. And it's a town of 5,000 people. It's grown to about 8,000 now, a village. Anyway, this is called After the Shift. Half asleep, the hours drift and spread, meandering in cavities, leaking through weep holes. The beating in the walls is the butcher at his bones, relimiting the body. There's an ending out by the harbour, where halyards clatter and wind moves through the warehouse, over yards of ivy, shards of glass, with gulls like tinfoil flecks above the dawn bright gable steps, whirling into light. The swirl of mackerel tails on concrete floors, fish eyes shine like a full 6 million glowing rivets on the bridge, or burning coals and engines, trailing vapour, all seen clear as Granny Thompson's visions of the dead upon the stage. At low tide near Burntisland, thank you. At low tide near Burntisland, you can walk out for I don't know how many kilometres, might be a couple of kilometres actually, across the seabed. As the tide leaves it, you can walk into this kind of alien landscape. Well, it always feels kind of alien to me anyway, not being a fish. This is called Where the Moon Starts to Pull Like Some Far Off Engine. The shadow's body lengthens limbs in amber light. The weight of air narrows dusk down by the bridges. The other side of the pallet yard, the railway line. Dry sand skims the surface where the tide is drawn, carrying waders' calls, not songs, to ragworms in the lugworm's mound. Delicate, a mud-crowned underworld collapsing. Mollusks in their shells dig the under, pearl and under. Thank you. I have in front of me, as it happens, a mollusk shell from about 100 million years ago, and or 120 million years ago, and fossilized. And we found it on a riverbed in Austin, Texas, where my wife is from. And again, you don't find these things without going looking for them. Onto something different now. This one's called Resistant Cultures. A dry wind carries the underwing's secret, sharp endings, filling lungs with breath of spores. In the first seeds, in splitting spurs, unlucky rivers heave into the gutter on the way back home. It might be a kindness to take us from doghouse furnace to the sidings, not yet brittle, but diamonds in the glitter dew, or mycelium threads made hard and cold and wintering below the shale-tipped ground, rich with veins vermilion, working through the midden heap. That relates to the shale mines in the town, but also there's an idea there from Joan Miro, and thank you, and an idea that emeralds and rubies can be found in rubbish tips. This next poem, there's going to be a film made about this poem. Coincidentally, there's been a film made with themes similar to this poem, and Toby Jones is going to be in it, and it's about Richard Burton's young life growing up near the mines and how he was shaped and reshaped by different father figures. It's called Extractions. It was Philip who tamed Richard's voice, constructed it, building on its melody, shortening its vowels, its Celtic overtones. He took him to the mountain top and tuned a voice once dreadful, hard to comprehend. He mastered it. With each word swung deep from pit of belly, Richard almost sang. I'm not really Richard's voice, but here. The great Atlantic fault starts in northern Spain. It goes under the Bay of Biscay, comes up in South Wales, and then again in Pennsylvania. A richness in the seam. You could blindfold the miners, they would still know the coalface. My father would talk about it the way some men talk about women, the beauty of the coalface. A chasm opens. My father would look at the seam. He would look at the seam of coal, a black shining ribbon of coal, and make a mark on it. Richard puts a finger to his tongue. Mime's making the mark. He pretends to be his father. He'd say, "Give me a number 2 mandrill, a half-headed pick, and if he hit it right, with one enormous blow, 20 tons of coal would fall out of the coal face." My son's hand fits in mine, the soft give of the coastal path, his inheritance. Sand, soot-like black, washed in on waves, each percussive step is a refrain. Thank you. I probably should have explained beforehand that some of that is taken from an interview conducted with Richard Burton, and some of those lines are Richard Burton's lines. You'll see it more clearly if you have the book. This next one's called Tailings, which is about what's left behind after the mines move on, or the mines are closed, or what's left after the process. There's an abandoned village at the hill at the back of the town, and I never used to go there as a kid. In fact, I never knew anyone who would walk for pleasure. And it seems like the history of the town, the labour history of the town, is to do with extracting resources from the place, but not really enjoying the landscape. And that's part of the sense of unease that I get in different places. And this is about an abandoned mining village. I walk in snow-filled ruins taking photos, brambles grown through window frames, a family home, then shiver on the threshold. There's a sound like drinking glasses brought together by a crowd. Maybe it's an echo, something breaking in the woods. The paths running through get overgrown, misremembered. Watching shadows dance in fading streams of sunlight, I get caught between the footprints of houses, school, and music hall. The disused mines are hidden, and I can't make out where shale was blasted from the seam or the downward slope where British Alcan dumped red mud. After rain, I try to mold the clay-like lumps and feel them break between my fingers. A childhood friend who died too young is down at the stream, the red pond, scraping off-white foam from the bank and letting the wind take it. Maybe nothing's lost, in opening my hand to the clouds, holding the snow and watching it fade like the trail under the rising field. Thank you. The red dust, the trucks that used to carry the bauxite to the aluminium plant, the red dust used to land on my windowsill as a child, and it's not there anymore. The red dust or the aluminium processing plant or the red mud that gets dumped as the after effect of the process. But it is there in lots of places in the world. We still use aluminium for so many things. And so that red dust isn't on my windowsill anymore, but it is on the windowsill of other children in other parts of the world. There's also a lot in the book about memorialization of people whose presence in the world might have been forgotten otherwise. You know, I think a lot of working people are kind of invisible to us anyway. But this digs back and uncovers some of the people in my family's life and from my family's stories. It's called Catherine Unsung, 1916. It starts with a quotation from a song, actually, which says, "We have an anchor that keeps the soul steadfast and sure while the billows roll, fastened to the rock which cannot move, grounded firm and deep in the Saviour's arms." There are songs for those in peril, brooding on chaos deep and low and rising with the tide. On my mother's side, a woman died while giving birth, and all of us are carried by her blood. She grew up near the Forth Bridge, saw it built, a black bone skeleton of ox or stag, and when pregnant with her 7th child, she'd gone into the water, saved a boy, and in her portrait with its lead-backed frame, her painted pupils, black as breathless air, reach out like the river in low light, everything drawn to the deep, the space between the woven seagrass, kelp bed, sand eels, shoaling cod. We stagger and are thrown onto the shore like knotted rack with holdfast broken, measuring the depths. Thank you. There was a portrait of my great-grandmother, which is always in our house, and the eyes were painted onto it. And imagining the story relating to our life took me to thinking about what the man or the boy was doing in the water in the first place. Anyway, if she hadn't been there, I wouldn't be here. This next one's about shipbuilding, and it's called the Sun Shipping Company Limited. And Sun Field, Sun Bank, Sun Cliff, and first light at the landing's edge were wrecks new risen, dotted lines on fading maps redrawn, porthole curtains twitching on a ship that sailed, and sunborn, sunchild, sun-worn, whistles in the ears with spines gone, red lead under nails, lines drawn on the surface of their skin as cells divide in cigarette smoke, rays of sunsplit, shadows in the graving dock, and Sunfield, Sunbank, Suncliff, keels are laid in silt, their ribs are salt corroded colonies of rust. My great-grandfather worked on the first ships that came out of Burntisland docks, and they were called Sunfield, Sunbank, Suncliffe. And the reading I just did in Burntisland was full of families, some of whom had worked in the shipyards, and one of them said that my great-grandfather sailed on the ship that he built. And people dispute that, whether it happened or not, I don't know. But what we do know is one time he came back with a tattoo of a naked woman on his arm. And my uncle thinks it's after this trip away. And my great-grandmother didn't like it. And he wasn't allowed to sleep in the same bed as her until he'd put some underwear on the tattoo. This next one's called The Berries, which is a local name that we give to fruit collecting to add to your money, to add to your wages, seasonal work, and sometimes weekend work. The berries. There's a need for human hands that feel the give of fruit and take it without bruising. You said the flesh of fruit was like ours, pressed firmly. You know when it'll give too much. I don't like to think of it. I want sweetness without withering. I'd love to love all summer long, but know what grows from fruit that's done with. Nothing certain as the season's end. Maybe now's the time to get to know the flesh and live in spite of what's sprung from it, what falls or moves beyond what's here, to start to think of what's my own. Okay. I'll stop there, and I'll read one more poem later with everyone else. But thank you again for listening, and thanks to everyone at Ignition Press, especially to Niall for his help with this booklet. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ian. That was absolutely gorgeous. I was transported there. That amazing sense of somewhere that is, oh, am I speaking but can't be seen? Maybe. Here I am. Video. There I am. Sorry about that. Yes, that sense of somewhere that one knows incredibly well, one feels one belongs to because of all the kind of enmeshment of that family history, but there's a sense of dislocation and yes, isolation and alienation within that familiar, which is incredibly powerful and done so very well in Ian's amazing book. So thank you so much for that from the bottom of my heart. That was very, very special. Thank you. I am now privileged actually to be able to introduce the amazing Eve Ellis and her amazing pamphlet Spit Valve. It's been a very intense journey. I think we've worked it very kind of closely on how to make her work sing. It already does, and she came up with the title Spit Valve, and it may be that it's worth sharing with you the epigram that goes with that title. So this is from Spit Valve Etiquette that you can find on wilktone.com. So when performing in a solo situation, either in front of an ensemble or in a recital, I think it's classy not to call too much attention to emptying out your spit valve. I turn slightly to the side and without any fuss, empty my spit out behind me. It's more subtle and less distracting than unceremoniously blowing all the water out in full view of the audience. So by dint of living life, we produce this stuff. We produce stuff that accumulates, and we don't quite know how to dispose of it discreetly or overtly, and my sense is this is very much at the heart of Eve's collection. What do we do with the trauma, the family, the kind of stuff that accumulates just because we live life? Magnificent and a wonderment though it may be, there are these hidden things, hidden experiences. And the bit that I completely was riveted by Eve's work is how precisely she can conjure worlds, really absolutely detailed, tactile. We absolutely know where we are, and yet there is the hidden, there is the enigmatic, there is possibly a menace that's there in a surreal and incredibly deft way of inviting us into these things. So I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm going to let the lovely Eve invite us into her worlds, invite us into her amazing pamphlet, Spitvalve.
My goodness, Claire, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you to Ignition Press for all of your support. Thank you to Ian and Patrick for reading so beautifully. It's been a privilege to launch this pamphlet alongside your beautiful work. And I also want to say thank you to all of you at home who have tuned in. You know, Claire referenced in the epigraph the idea of what, how do we get rid of the stuff? Do we do it discreetly? Do we do it unceremoniously? And I would like to dedicate my unceremonious reading tonight to my family who are watching from the US, and in particular to my wonderful mother, to whom the pamphlet is dedicated. Mom, I love you. And thank you so much to everyone else who's here, and there are many other loved people watching. I want to say to everyone, please get your content warnings firmly in place and look after yourselves. Oh, and get any small children out of the room. Okay, here we go. All my dead relatives are picnicking on the banks of the Tennessee. And it's a fine day for it. Checkered blankets spread under willow trees, children muddying their pinafores, plenty of hayseed for everyone's teeth. In their sweat yellow dresses, the women dish out dessert, burnt sugar, creamy, and the river washes over a buildup of sticks. A number of the company are getting sloshed. A girl laughs, high and zithery. The menfolk lean back in the grass, considering her stockings. Granny eyes the men over her specs. Two uncles play catch with her knitting. A cake knife goes missing. Cousins get bored, play catch with the crockery, hurl saucers like discuses at the willow trees. China dust rains into the baby's pram. Granny shoos the cousins. Women jiggle the baby. Shush. Let's play hide and seek, a small boy suggests. But there's already rustling in the bushes, a zither shriek, crying. No one's seen the girl in a while. Then the men sidle back out again. There's a pause, but this is eternity, plenty of time. Everyone looks at each other like portraits in a very long hallway where nothing can be changed or undone. So the women get busy with the packing. The men tie it all down to the horse cart. The cake knife turns up, and at dusk, the girl's found. She's at the river, kneeling in the shallows, looking for the place where her mouth used to be. The next poem moves towards ghosts. This is the only poem I've ever written that uses the language of Southern Appalachia, which is connected to my ancestry on one side of the family. And most of the dialect words in here are related to the landscape of Southern Appalachia, a mountainous region. but there are a few other words worth knowing, one of which is haint, which is a regional word for ghost, and jasper, which is a word for stranger. So the speaker of the poem is not me. The time is not now. Here we go. Haint. Last night I heard the dogs again, this side of the crick. This morning, another window smudged and her bitty footprints in the skift. Ma wipes her eyes and the glass, takes the broom out to snow sweep. Pa's painting the fence blue like a river she can't cross. Tonight, they'll throw salt on the coals. They'll tuck me in while the sun's stumbling down through the hollers, tripping on all those new stones. But I've been up early when it's airish, with no light yet over the balds, and crept into the front room and seen her playing by the stove, her mite fingers dandling the red embers. I know she sees me with her black eyes and her brickle hair and her gap mouth and her pocky skin. I say, baby sis, Jasper girl, where have you been? This is another poem of childhood, but completely different. And it came about because sometimes I come up with the very strangest, dumbest idea I can think of, and then I have to write to justify it. Here we go. A French doll instead of a left lung. On X-ray, it looked like a fetus in a cage, its head a small onion, livid white. She has a French doll instead of a left lung, my aunt told everyone. The neighbors, the pastor, the grocery store clerk, as she paid for the bubble gum I'd stolen. I had to play catcher in baseball, of course. I was useless at running. A stray ball hit me in the chest. I felt a twist as the dolly rolled over, a tickle as she winked her eye. She clapped her hands as I sang, stiffened as I cried. A button nose crept up my throat and I gulped it back down. Teachers, we don't see the issue. Father, you're from a long line of fine china. Dolly drummed on my rib cage at bedtime. Poupée, poupée. My breast buds came in like megaphones. I wore heavy layers, tried knitting a soundproof vest. Still, chanson after chanson from that new saloon in my chest, the hiccups unbearable. Grandmother narrowed her eyes. Are you pregnant? She asked, or just sick? A burlesque show broke out in my throat. A stitched thing inside me said, yes. Okay. So from here, I want to move to maybe a nice poem for the season, shall we? It's a lovely day today. It's been so nice to feel the weather getting warmer and flowers blooming. So yeah, a poem about spring, when a young woman's fancy turns to fucking shit up. This is for some girls that I used to know. And it's called Mud Season at the Girls' Facility. They huddle in the drive before lineup, wearing clag-spattered jumpsuits, work boots, caked like small golems. But when the first April evening wafts through, they tug up the windows, shout across the bogged lawn, shriek at hills still hairy with bare trees, haw like donkeys in the mess hall, drop plastic plates, stamp on smeared egg, brain shakes the vinyl-sided dorm, staff deduct points, assign extra chores, but girls open their throats and bellow. Oh, to be this fucking loud in the overheated schoolhouse, throwing dictionaries, yanking off doorknobs, hurling desks at the wall, quaking the floorboards like spring queens, dancing the rage of it until girl after girl is wrestled to the ground, restrained, mud guttural, staff clipboards are out. Tonight's the deep freeze, cement timeout rooms, ice patches of sorry and quiet, but you, girl who threw nothing, thought screaming beneath you, sit alone in your dorm room, watching the pale planet of yourself in the glass, heaving the mud from your lungs, the snowmelt and thick of it. We all have those friendships that are so intense in adolescence. You know, it's our first real understanding of intimate relationships, even within a friendship. And we have those friendships from adolescence that continue past adolescence and those ones that don't. And here's a poem about that. Reunion. I saw that she had moved into the disused stables. Under a dangling bulb in the second stall, she was playing her trombone. I opened the gate and watched her slide the gold tubes up and down. It was your second best solo in band, I told her. She sat down hard on a hay bale, studying the cement floor. Her boots were farm boots, like you'd see on an old peat digger in Sligo. I asked her if she still loved Jesus, what it might take for us to be friends again. A phantom stallion kicked the adjoining wall. I wanted hair like yours, I said. I didn't understand about you and your father. She looked up then, just a little, and her forehead wore my wrinkles like a bridle. And I thought about the height of a horse, how it's measured in hands, and all the saddles tacked to the wall with nothing to ride on. Cassie, we survived, I said. They've put us out to pasture. She played a last flurry of notes and emptied her spit valve, pulled the hanging cord, and turned out the light. Here's a little poem about the kind of bizarre, hilarious, existential questions you can only get away with asking yourself when you're lying awake alone at like 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, questions like, how did I come to be who I am? Or what was I really like as a baby? Night theory. At birth, I swallowed the universe like a spore. I've been breathing it out ever since. This is why the cat slept by my cot. She sensed my planetary music and wanted it. No one thought I was very wise. This is why my mother cried over me. I was absorbent as tissue, as paper white. With each tear that sank in, tiny switches and my DNA turned on, like light bulb filaments. Plink, plink. I am not sure how I acquired language. Possibly it was the space between my father's eyes, that tundra I wanted to touch. The right sound, I thought, could brush it. So when I got control of my jaw, I sang out my first few notes. This is how I woke up the snow. This is how I summoned ice and rain. Also how I conjured a brother, so I wouldn't have to carry the words alone. We lay in our little beds, passing the language between us. Meanwhile, our parents slept on. Outside, the raccoons were listening. I have inherited their yellow eyes, their nightly chorus, their claws. Just two more. Tiny poem or my mother, who moved out of her stepmother's house the day she turned 18. Coda. My mother was a Ford pickup in the late 1960s. She carried God's long-haired children through the backwoods of Georgia. In her truck bed, she kept a baby killer's boots, henna bottle, ironed underwear. At her back, the guns rattled all night as she rode. And before I read this last poem, I want to invite you to just remember yourself at 15 for a moment. Think about maybe what you looked like, what you liked to wear, what you listened to, what you thought was cool, what you thought about yourself. To my 15-year-old self. Instead of you swallowing that whole bottle of pills, let's put on our parkas and snowshoes, go for a stomp through town. It's still midnight out here, the snowbank's taller than we are. That bride of death dress you keep wearing blends in with the drifts, like I'm walking with your floating head, your loose set of boots. Let's go. Partial you, whole me, skidding down hills we sledded with neighborhood kids. Remember when we wore the same skin? How my hand was yours inside the red mitten as the toboggan barreled towards us? Here's the corner where the schoolboy slapped us again and again. I can still see a woman running motherly towards us. I can't talk to her, you frown. So we lumber on to the ice-coated bike path where you stashed your notebooks in a tree's knothole to keep them from everyone. My feet are as numb as your obstinate face. We've reached the old high school only I graduated from, though I would have liked to cross the stage with you, carrying the diploma with your palms, wearing your long hair. I felt compelled to dye black, then lop off. Look, here's the hairdresser shop, the hulk of a chair, where I looked straight ahead in the mirror, said, cut. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eve. That was, as always, really beautifully read. Wonderful reading. You know, when you hear a really good poet read, you kind of think, oh yeah, you know, only one person could have written those poems. And so there's very much, you know, that sense of that is an Eve Ellis poem. So get hold of the pamphlet and you can read lots. There's something on the back actually about how the worlds that Eve is creating are kind of tinged with menace and the uncanny, but I think you also get a real sense of the kind of the tenderness and the beauty in those poems as well. So thank you so much. So I'm just going to invite all three poets to pop up again and read one last short poem before we close. So Patrick, over to you, and then Ian, and then Eve. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, well, just before I read, thanks everyone so much for coming and listening so intently. And thanks both to Eve and Ian for their amazing readings. Yeah, so some of us, thanks to Henry David Thoreau, perhaps have a cottage in our heads that we'd all like to retreat to. And this poem is the part of my brain that wants to stay with the trouble of this moment we're living through, interrogating the side of my brain that just wants to drop out, building your hut in the woods. Aye, but where will you actually live? I'll live where I've loafed all the clay onto itself until it's round and dreamless as a hollow trunk of terebinth. Yeah, okay, but like, where will you sleep? I'll sleep in the bunk I have jammed into softening walls while the whole new house in its constituents dries, as if I'm on the only 14th floor medieval hands ever laid by a dusty window pane set in an arm-deep gable of slough. But how? Not how will you build it, just how? the usual means. Southern islands in the sound of milk steaming. Teen volunteers, mattocks, the usual means. But what about work? Work. A desk looking onto slate and weather vanes will do if I've left my house in the care of its orchard. Between living and working, when will you ever rest? Should angles disappear and the structure slopingly breathe? Should I hold it in the way, sometimes the dirt, a house? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. It's been such an amazing privilege, pleasure for me to be reading alongside Patrick and Eve, whose poetry I love. Well done to both of you. It's been an amazing experience, and I hope we can read again sometime together in the future. This short poem of mine is called A Forest. I heard it from my father's father, how the giants spread from forests of dead steel, through the gates and echoed imitations, each limb in step, the shimmering edge in breeze and light, the loss of self in play. Still the roots connect unseen and fibrous underneath a center I had misimagined. These clones shot from the mass, split dry from the bone behind, degeneration visible. But I know that something grew here. I can feel it move the slabs beneath my feet and work into the houses on the new estate. Thank you.
Okay, so last poem here. I just have to say as a preface that I've been a teacher of secondary school English for 20 years. And so I have taught Romeo and Juliet so many times, and I have watched Romeo and Juliet die so many times. And that in part gave rise to this poem. Speaking of Shakespeare's Juliet and the women of my family, say you pull that dagger out of your stomach. Let the glass bottle drop from your fist. Say your hands unbutton, lift those funeral clothes. Stains can evaporate off bed sheets like cumulus clouds. Say you buck the boy's shadow right off you. Watch him back out of the room. Say you're alive in your party dress, 13 again, tripping backwards up a flight of stone steps into a loose dressing gown, mid-morning, the light yellow, acidic. Say your father is careful, your mother's always home. The sun is not a lemon waiting for the knife. Say by the window, your book lies open.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's such a great line to end on, actually. Thank you so much, Eve. Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you so much, Ian. Really wonderful readings, astoundingly good readings. And thank you to everybody for joining us this evening or whatever time it is where you are. Please do check out the pamphlets via the link in the chat. And we hope that you'll check out their work and find out a bit more about these poets. It's been a real privilege working with them. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your day. Take care.